Hey, everyone. This week, I am doing an interview with a very special former Scientologist and Sea Org member, Karen de la Carriere. Now, there's a number of reasons why Karen is a special person, not the least of which is that she's the one who actually put me on video for the first time when I first started coming out and talking about Scientology. In fact, Karen's channel, Surviving Scientology on YouTube, was the first place that I came out publicly under my own name of Chris Shelton about 4 years ago. And she was instrumental in making that happen and helping me to start talking about this stuff for real. So I will always owe Karen a debt of gratitude for that. And it is long overdue, I think, actually, that she and I have a conversation on video here about the subject of Scientology. Since the last time we did it was actually back, all those years ago. So Karen, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, we got a lot of things to talk about, lots of questions I have for you. And I know this has been talked about a lot in other places and stuff. And I, of course, get this question all the time as well. But I realized when I was kind of prepping for this that I actually don't know. How did you get into Scientology?
I was dating a guy in London called Barry Fairburn. I really liked this guy. And he put his hands on my shoulders, looked in my eyes and said, Karen, if you want a relationship with me, you got to do Scientology, period. So I said, oh. And later in the week, I was holding empty soup cans. And I was talking about my life. And that's how it started.
Wow. Okay. Pretty simple. I was surprised to learn that you actually have a British background.
Yes. I got into Scientology in London. And I went to the flagship Apollo from East Grinstead. I moved from London to East Grinstead and trained up to Class 8. These Class 8 classes, meaningless. but Scientology had a footprint in London, and that's how I got in.
Okay. All right, cool. And this was all those years ago.
Early 70s.
Early 70s. Okay. And you went pretty fast because you ended up from there going to the Sea Org and the ship and meeting L. Ron Hubbard and working with him or working around him in his vicinity. I mean, I have to ask, what was that like? I mean, what was it like meeting the guy and working around him?
Well, when I look back on hindsight, the one thing I remember, I know Hubbard, many people say he did have a lot of charm and charisma, but the one thing I recall most was his screaming tirades. When he yelled, it was almost like the Apollo shook. He had a volume of screaming. And when they declared me suppressive person, I had an intelligence guy from OSA come to see me called Charlie. And Charlie said, Karen, you're talking to Mike Rinder, you're talking to Marty Rathburn. This is irrevocable. Come back to the mother church. Because if you don't, you will be declared suppressive person. And I jumped on him and said, how do you know? You bought phone records. That's illegal. I hadn't visited Marty in Texas. I hadn't visited Mike Rinder at the time. Subsequently, yes, I did. But at that time, there was no visit. Yet they knew. So I said, you're buying phone records. That's illegal. And he wouldn't deny that. And he said, we have PIs. So they declared me suppressive person. And one of their big charges is that I yelled. In the Sea Org, I screamed and I was interpolative. And I thought, boy, oh boy, the person that wrote my suppressive person declare never heard L. Ron Hubbard scream, because when he got a fit of temper, see, I was doing counseling exactly behind his research room. I audited in a cabin of the chief engineer. So every time I came out of a counseling session carrying the folder with the PC, I could look through the glass and see Hubbard working at his desk. It was all glass, see-through. Well, those were days. I don't know if you've read any of Janice's book. It was adventure. It was going to ports in the Mediterranean, and it was a different Scientology than this radical Scientology of today. Yes, it had its dark moments and it had its punishments, but it was more like a country club, if you can believe that. You always, inevitably, got a day off every 2 weeks. It was just, you just informed your seniors. There was no begging for a day off.
Interesting.
It really was different in the 70s.
Yes. Yes.
The RPF, it was considered almost, people would protest that people took too long and said, come on, you're getting 5 hours of training and then get back to work. You could talk to the RPF. You wouldn't. Now, the RPF, you can't even speak to them. You know all that, Chris.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
3 years. 3 years.
And I've been told that it was, I mean, I've even heard, I had one person tell me that back then in that day, it was kind of like going to the RPF was kind of like they didn't use the word vacation, but it was kind of implied. It was sort of like, yeah, it's the best kept secret, man. That's where you kind of want to be for a little while because you get a break from all the day-to-day craziness.
And you were in 4 to 6 months. Anyone can take a break for 4 to 6 months, no?
Right.
Yeah. And how much is it in this day and age, Chris? How many years?
Years and years. I knew a couple of people who were on it for a decade. I was on it for 3 years. Yeah. And to finish the program, I didn't.
No day off.
Oh, no time off, no holidays, nothing. Yeah.
Manual labor.
That's right. Intense physical labor, bone breaking. I broke bones. I got scars on my body from it. It's good times. How much pay for the hours? Oh yeah, quarter pay. So the max you were going to get a week was $12. A construction force for free. Oh. Exactly. That's exactly what we were. That's exactly right. But I'll tell you what I dislike most about the RPF. Yes. The Scientology telescope, microscope, that you are bad. Yep. You are evil. You have evil purposes. You have evil intentions. Can you imagine? You're in pretty good shape, Chris. You have critical thought. Your videos are wonderful. Your channel is great and appreciated. But can you imagine what it does to someone to make them focus on their bad for years? Yeah, I can imagine what that feels like. It's pretty, it's pretty damaging. If I was going to ascribe my PTSD or something like that to anything, it would be to the RPF. That was definitely a pretty horrific experience overall. Not something I would endorse or ever want anybody to have to experience. And it was so interesting to me to see and hear the experience of others in other time periods and how it was different and how in many ways it was corrupted even beyond, how bad it, you had the mud box brigade and you had guys staying up for days. It wasn't all fun and games back in the 70s either, but it was made so much worse over the years, and so much longer and so much more degrading to an individual. And that's something I have noticed from putting together all the things that people have told me about it.
That is the fatal flaw in Scientology. It's management by punishment.
Right.
Let's shrink you down. Let's cave you in. Let's make you a dot. Let's make you smaller than a dot. Let's make you a subatomic particle.
Exactly. It must have been so odd in hindsight to look back on those days and think of how you thought about Hubbard then and how you think about him now. But in that time, in that place, what did you see in him, or what was your thoughts about him, and how have those changed over the years?
Well, most people on the ship thought of him as God. He really was considered a superhuman being. And Hubbard loved that. He wanted adoration. He wanted acknowledgement. He craved, just like David Miscavige craves all that now. He wanted that. Yes, I thought of him as some kind of genius. I really did. And I watched him do case supervising. Later, you find out how much of everything he took was from others. But at that time, you only thought, God, he's genius. Let me tell you a very quick little anecdote.
Yeah.
There was a couple in Orange County who were educators for 30 years. They were school principals, they were teachers, their life was devoted to teaching. And after 30 years, they got the summary of what bogged students: going past a misunderstood word, too much significance, not enough mass, and too steep a gradient. And there was this dinner party in Orange County, south of Los Angeles, with Alan Walters and this couple who were in education. And they presented it all to Hubbard. This is it. The very next day, Hubbard brought out study tech, signed his name, never gave them credit at all. Didn't even mention their name. And their jaws dropped. They had just briefed Hubbard. And then Hubbard did student tapes like he had invented. To me, that was a classic example of theft of study tech is good. It is good not to go past a misunderstood. It is good to have dictionaries. All of this has been assigned to Hubbard's genius. But it was this couple. Hubbard did not evolve or be brilliant to bring that out. This is just an example.
Exactly. In fact, I was privileged to actually track them down, that particular couple you're talking about.
Oh, you did?
I did. And I actually interviewed the woman because her husband had died back in 2007. They had been declared suppressive by Hubbard, of course, and kicked out of the church and went off and did their own thing for a long time. And then they ended up separating, and she still thought very highly of her ex. And I tracked her down, and she lives in Australia, and interviewed her on my channel for my study tech video. I actually talked to her about the whole thing. And and what you say is right. I mean, they had dinner with Hubbard, and the next day he's lecturing on this stuff as though he came up with it. And that was just one of many examples. At the book convention that we were at this last weekend, a woman there told me that she had given Hubbard, she had come up with the idea for conditions in exchange by dynamics. And I thought, wow. That, because those are you kind of have to be in Scientology to get the significance of conditions in exchange by dynamics. It's a whole procedure, and it has to do with ethics and stuff. We don't need to get into all that, but these are two procedures that are done all the time in Scientology.
Yeah.
And Hubbard didn't come up with that, but his name is on it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. Scientology policy lists what makes you a suppressive person. And one of the things is, if you say that someone other than Hubbard
that's right.
created any of this, you are a suppressive, antisocial personality.
That's right.
Wow, what a construct, right?
Right? I know
it's mocked up and put into policy. And then, Chris, I have such a bond with you, or any. We did that journey. I did it for almost 20 years. You were in the Sea Org how long?
17
years.
17 years and 8 on staff before that. So yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
We really do. It's hard to get it across to people. There's so much information you have, but there's also just the emotional experience of it, and just the experience, the life experience of it. And it's hard to get that across sometimes to people. You can get individual pieces of information across, but you wish you could mind meld with people and kind of give them the whole, here it all is, sort of thing.
I imagine doctors that do a residency together, 12 hours a day.
Yes.
And they're it's almost like a brotherhood or a fellowship it's almost like we did very advanced internships together as students. I've always thought of this lifetime as my lifetime where I study it. This is my lifetime to be a perpetual student. Always trying to. And I got to say, Chris, you absolutely go where the trail takes you. You're pursuing truth. Truth seeker.
Yes, that's right. It's a fun and frustrating and sometimes angering journey on this, because when you're looking for truth, you don't always get it right. Sometimes you go down dark alleys or dead ends, and you start thinking you got a line on something and you talk about it, but then you got to kind of pull back a little bit. So it is a journey, and that's what I love about it. But it definitely can have its ups and downs,
Right. What is just earth shaking is what you learn after you step out of the bubble. It really rocks your universe. Big time.
Yeah, big time. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the bubble. We talked about a few things before we got on here on this. And one of the things that is definitely controversial, it definitely gets thrown around, a bit of a ping pong in the ex-Scientology world, is whether Scientology is actually a religion or not. And for some people, this is a big question. For others, it's no big deal. For me, it's kind of in the middle. I think it has some significance. I think it has legal significance too, but I think that ship's already sailed. But what do you think? What's your take on? I mean, is it a religion? And if so, why? If not, what's your think on it?
Okay, I'm going to give you 1, 2, 3 on this.
Yeah.
Number 1, a religion, by very definition, should be ethical, moral, taking you higher to your higher self, your better self, making you better than you are. The first thing Scientology does is, after it extorts money from you, it will not refund the money, even though you're done, even though you say, I'm not going to take their services, it will keep your money. That is unethical. That is not religious. That is not holy or sacred. It's thievery. So the first characteristic of Scientology is, Chris, did you meet a guy in this convention, Ned McCrink? Did you meet Ned?
I did not interact with him. I saw him and I knew who he was, but we did not get a chance to talk.
Okay. Ned McCrink gave $1 million for Orange County ID law. $1 million. I wish I didn't.
Wow.
And guess what? They declared him suppressive person, but they kept the $1 million. Is this religious? is this ecclesiastical? Not only that, they've got his daughter in the Sea Org, the AOLA. We're going to be interviewing Ned very soon. You must take your share at Ned. Ned's been in 40 years.
And I worked with his daughter, Sarah, in the Sea Org for years.
Ned would love to interview. I'll set it up so you have it.
Great.
Anyway, Ned, in their anger, they redid the plaque, even though the cult is sitting with $1 million of Ned McCrink's money. His name has been taken off the plaque as a donor. Fine, take the name off the plaque, but give back the money. They
exactly.
keep $1 million.
Oh, God.
Luis Garcia was exactly the same. He gave about $1 million. Took off Luis Garcia's name off the plaque, but keep the $1 million. So back to your question. Is it a religion? And if not, why is it not a religion? I don't think a religion can beg, borrow, steal, raise your credit limits, extort your money, take the gold out of your teeth, take what you have. And then if you change your mind, or if you run into a huge financial problem and you have 100,000 sitting at flag, forget about it. They're going to keep your money and suppressive person declared.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so that's number one.
Yep.
Number two, why is it not a religion? I say it's not a religion. The reason they convinced the IRS they were a religion is that they really explained how they're dealing with the spirit. And a spirit is a sort of quasi-religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Only, whether it's the Bible or any branch of Christianity, dealing with the soul or spirit is not, it's in a different dimension, not physical universe. Therefore, as you know, the whole of OT3 to OT8 is to do with exorcising spirits.
Yep.
The IRS felt, well, this is spiritual, and therefore it has some basics of being a religion. Number two of why it's not a religion is the amount of punishment and the amount of fair game that it does. It's vengeful. You step out, they make a hate page on you. They take stuff that you gave up in your confessional and they put it on the internet. Chris, I'll tell you, I came out of the Sea Org feeling dowdy and feeling blah. And you know what? I went and had a boob job. Who cares? This is Hollywood. I wanted to have more curves other than your boyfriend or husband. Who cares?
Exactly.
I ran getting a boob job in session because there was anesthesia. And Scientology touts how it will handle your moments of unconsciousness. They put up a hate website. Ha, 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 Karen de la Carriere had a boob job.
Right.
And you know what? They made Alexander Jench go and read the hate site that I had a boob job. In other words, they encouraged my son, my only child, who is dead and gone at 27, to read the hate page on me that I had a boob job. Is that religious?
Fair enough. I actually agree with you on all those points. Those are actually very good points to make because it has to do with action, what they're actually doing in the real world. And what they're doing is definitely, as you said, not religious at all. I mean, fair gaming people is very vindictive, to say the least. Would you say that, like, what's your understanding when we throw the word cult around? What do you think about with that word?
A cult has a guru. A cult has a leader. And his word is God speaking. That really does fit Scientology. You cannot challenge Hubbard. And if you challenge David Miscavige, you will be cut off from all Scientologists. You will be cut off from your own children. You will be forced to divorce your spouse, so on and so forth. So the primary thing of a cult is adoration and worship to one person who's considered more brilliant, more genius, more effective, more powerful, a supernatural human being. Another thing of a cult is it slowly cuts you off from the outside world. And that is very much Scientology. You are not supposed to date or even mingle with those outside. The cult wants you to cluster, if I can use that word. In fact, some
I had never thought about that in relation to the BTs, but that's perfect.
Well, Chris, sometimes I've thought of the Sea Org as simply a cluster.
Yeah.
They're one unified bunch of people acting in unison, talking like parrots. You can predict what they say and how they vengefully, clusters are supposedly mean and vengeful, Hubbard said. Well, look at the way the Sea Org retaliates at someone who speaks out. But I'm glad it made you laugh.
No, it's good. It's a great analogy. And I actually agree with you on all those points. The things you listed out there are exactly right, as far as how I see destructive cults.
Yeah.
And of course, there's also this whole thing of, there's the group think and the in-group, sort of idea and mentality. And there's also this sort of fear of things outside that group, this sort of us versus them kind of thing. And they really go out of their way to create that. And it's so subtle. You don't see it when it's happening, but suddenly you are in this place where you realize that the outside world is bad and this world is good. And so therefore, you have to stay inside the parameters of this world in order to be a good person or something. It's really quite crazy how we fall into these things,
Chris, one characteristic of a cult, which would also answer why it's not a religion, is the obsession with money. Cults want cash.
Oh,
and cults want recruitment of new members.
Yep,
a cult
absolutely.
Is absolutely wanting existing members. Look at how Jehovah's Witnesses must go door to door. Look at how the missionaries of Church of LDS knock on every door. A cult absolutely wants expansion of members, but most of all wants cash.
Big time. Absolutely right. And you nailed it earlier on, also on this point where they won't give you your money back, which is, obviously they're, big money making operation. Okay. So now you have, suffered, I think, a lot more than I certainly did. I had a certain degree of suffering from disconnection, but you had your son. That whole situation. We did a whole video on that. It came out and talked to you about that. I still, to this day, think that is one of the most important things I've ever put out on my channel, and thank you for being part of that and helping me put that whole thing together about how your son Alexander, died as a result of activity with the church. What you mentioned a dismissiveness on the part of the church towards disconnection. What did you mean by that?
Well, the cult, I can't even call them a church. The cult tries to do a shifting of all responsibility on disconnection by saying the person asked, they in their free will chose to disconnect. But you and I know we were insiders a long time. The ethics officer calls you and pounds on the desk.
Oh, yeah.
And you disconnect or else.
That's
It's
right.
completely ordered within the church. The dismissiveness is the cult saying he chose, you willfully choose to toss your own mom or dad or sibling or child. You willfully choose to disconnect from them. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
So they lie. They lie. This is a cult of lies. And to not get, I will tell you something. I was told by an OSA executive that one of the biggest problems that flaps on OSA lines, the biggest, the number one, top one, was disconnection.
Of course.
It causes, and I don't see, Chris, I'd like your view on this.
Mm-hmm.
How can the cult be sustainable when it's designed to break up a nucleus family? How can it be sustainable?
Well, that's the thing. It's one of those things that it's going to have to get past at some point. But, you know, the JWs still do it too. The Amish still do it. I mean, it's a problematic practice. And I don't know how given how they are losing more members than they're gaining right now, you would think that they could, you know, we would give some serious thought to going back and canceling this nonsense, you know. But I think that the driving force behind it is that Miscavige, and maybe Hubbard before him, but certainly I'm sure Miscavige thinks this, that they can't survive if they cancel disconnection, because then I think they think everybody will leave, which I think is a pretty powerful statement about how much Miscavige actually believes in the tech in the first place. I don't think he does, you know? And so I think he feels like he can only use these strong arm, you know, shunning, disconnection, fair game tactics in order to hold on to people at all. And given the totalitarian nature of Scientology, I think that's true with the model, with how he's created it, how he runs that show. It doesn't. The thing that's so tragic about Scientology is none of this had to happen this way. None of this had to go down like this. It could have been so different, and it would have been, you know, we would have been having very different conversations about the workability of the tech, the workability of Scientology overall, if it didn't go this authoritarian route. Then some of the beliefs might be a little odd and kooky, and some people might go, well, that's crazy. And certainly Xenu would just be kind of fucking crazy Xenu. But the ARC triangle or the 8 dynamics or even the tone scale, you could kind of look at some of these and go, okay, well, maybe some of this stuff actually makes a little bit of sense and I could use some of this in my life. But the way they've morphed into this authoritarian thing, it just makes all of it the worst possible interpretation of how it could be, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Beautifully spoken. Absolutely beautifully spoken. On disconnection, the cult have Facebook police.
Right.
And they search all day long to see who's friends with who.
Exactly. It's North Korean, man. It's fucking crazy. It's like, what are you people doing? Leave, you know, people have the right to a personal life. And that's one of the things Scientology just sort of throws out the window is, no, you don't have a personal life. We own you.
Yes.
You know, yes. And they never say it that way. No one will ever say we own you. But everything they do say, everything they demand of you communicates that's how they feel. And I definitely felt as when I was in the Sea Org that I had the right to be doing those things, you know, to say those things to public Scientologists, to treat staff members like dirt, because you're lucky to even be here. You know, you're lucky that I'm even, you know, allowing you to do Scientology. I mean, come on, man, you know, so yeah,
I don't think there's a cult in the world or a church in the world that has Facebook police that threaten you if
Right.
you don't unfriend so-and-so, you are going to be declared an antisocial personality.
That's right.
Can you believe the arrogance of how they carry on? I do know people who've been declared suppressive person because they would not disconnect who they were friends with on Facebook.
Yep, that's right. That's how I got into a bunch of trouble to start with. Was I was friending people on Facebook right after I left the Sea Org, and they were like, "How dare you? You know, you're creating ill repute for the Sea Org." I'm like, "I'm making friends with people. No, it's not okay. You're using your Sea Org comm lines to further your." This is literally what they told me. I had knowledge reports written on this. You're using your Sea Org comm lines to forward your personal agenda. I'm like, I don't have anything else but a personal agenda. I'm a person. That's what I'm doing now. I'm not in the Sea Org. Come on, man. You know, like, let me have a life. No, you must not have a life unless, you know, you can only live the life we say you can lead.
Yeah.
And that was the eye-opening moment for me of like, oh my God, you know, something's up here. And that's what drove me to the internet. So yeah, it's this Facebook policing stuff, this lack of a private life. It's wackadoodle. Hey everybody, so this is my little sponsor spot for BetterHelp.com. And this is an online counseling service. It is not a crisis line or a suicide prevention line. There are other services for that. But I wanted to endorse BetterHelp.com because it is a service I believe in, and it is something that I think a lot of the viewers of my channel could actually benefit from. It is cheap, it's affordable. It is licensed therapists. It is not just, you know, life coaches or something. It's actual trained professionals who can be contacted through the link below, right? I'm displaying it on the screen right now. It's betterhelp.com/cshelton, and the link is in the description section below down on YouTube here. And that is a service that you can get text help, voice, chat, or video. You don't have to necessarily be looking or talking to the person who's helping you, because sometimes that's a button for people. Also, if you get, you know, within 24 hours, you'll get hooked up with a counselor. If that person's not doing it for you, you can get somebody else. If you can't, you know, the fees are like $35 to $65 a month or a week for the service. Pretty cheap, pretty good, affordable service. I really don't know how they do it actually. I'm amazed by it, but it's something that does actually help people. My wife Melissa has actually used the service and gotten a lot from it. And there is financial aid for people who can't, you know, maybe make even those payments. So give it a shot. Check out the link. Fill out the survey. You know, give it a go. See if it helps. I think that that getting that kind of help is something all of us need sometimes. I've spent, you know, I've really leaned on my friends and family over the years, but sometimes friends and family aren't really the right person to talk to, and using a service like this might be exactly what you need. So again, check out the link below and betterhelp.com.
Chris, they seem to have a compulsion to make enemies. That's tell me your thought on that.
Absolutely. This was the thing that actually frustrated me the most, and I'm sure it must have frustrated you too. You know, with Alex, at the time, you know, they were going out of their way to turn him against you merely because you had chosen to not do Scientology services anymore. Not even at the point where you were talking to Mike and Marty, or at the point where you were, you know, out of the church, or where you were saying, well, I don't think I really want to be a Scientologist anymore. No, it's way before that. It's almost like they herd you like cattle. They drive you to a place where you have to go against them if you want to have any sort of idea of a self-determined life, you know? So that's how I saw it. And I was shocked at how far out of their way they went to make me an enemy when I was trying to cooperate with them.
Yeah.
You know, that's what blew me away.
Yeah. I've defended you many times, Chris. You may not know this. When people say, well, Chris Shelton, I've said, do you know that when he was in San Diego, he recruited 20 counselors, we call auditors, 20. He recruited he was in the spirit. He wanted people to sit down and talk out their pains and sufferings. He recruited 20 He came back and he was slaughtered for not being on ED 339R.
That's right.
And you know, people have a gigantic shift when they hear this. They
Wow.
hear your good heart and how you really tried to actually do something. And you were,
I did.
you know,
I did. You know, it's funny. I take some controversial opinions about some things sometimes, and I know not everybody's going to agree with everything I have to say, nor do I want them to. But yeah, I want people to do better. I want everybody to do better, and whatever that means for them, you know. And I really don't get some of the infighting and some of the stuff that goes on. I don't know. What have you run into with some of that? You know?
I hate that.
I know.
I hate activists fighting with activists.
Yes.
I hate it. I try to be more of a peacemaker. Not that I can't say that I've been that successful, but there is. But you know what? If you really want to lift up the curtains and peep, there are Scientology cult activists stirring the pot behind the scenes.
That's true.
And almost always a big vendetta has some hidden who.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I thought when I first came out, you know, it was all of us on the same team, and I operated on that basis, and I have tried to play the peacemaker too, and sometimes have really bombed on that and really screwed it up. But it's sometimes successful, you know, but I did have to learn the hard lesson that we aren't necessarily all on the same page. But I think most of us are. I think most of us get along pretty well. And I think most of us, you know, are pushing this ball down the road of Scientology activism, I guess you could say, right? And trying to just get the word out there that it's bad stuff and you should stay away from it. And we, you know, so have our ups and downs. I don't know. I've never really figured out any other way to describe it.
Yeah. You're like me, Chris. We have friends, Facebook friends, and other friends in all camps, whether they're indies, whether they're free zone, whether they're anonymous, whether they're ex-Sea Org, whether they're vitriolic critics.
That's right.
We've left behind all that Scientology, I am more elite than you, all this garbage and nonsense. To me, Sea Org, it's an embarrassment that one was so closely in occult thinking. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, it is embarrassing actually, and there's regret there for sure. And it takes some work to get past it. It really does, you know. And I see different people over the years, over the last couple of years that I've been doing this, you know, you and others for longer, you know, who have a hard time letting go of some grudges or have a hard time letting go of some status buttons or something, you know. And I'm sure I've been guilty of that as well. It's a process. And it's just something we constantly are working at. And I, you know, even when I criticize the tech, and I do criticize the tech quite heavily, I try to also say what was right about it or what helped people with it or about it. I try to do that. And I, you know, and sometimes people glom onto just the bad thing you said, or just the one thing you said that they disagree with, and they kind of just want to really with you about that. Yeah. And I kind of, you know, and I'm kind of like, look, just consider what I said. Maybe I'm not right, you know, but here's what I'm thinking. Here's my case. Just think about it. And I just try to do it that way, you know, but it's sometimes there's just doesn't quite work out, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I hear you.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's get back to some of what you have to say about some of this, because you know, a lot of people don't necessarily, or I don't know about a lot of people, but some people might not know that you were actually trained to the highest level in Scientology, class 12, and not just class 12 auditor, but you were a class 12 case supervisor. So you were overseeing cases and directing them on what to do from the top of the bridge. Is that, do I have that right? Yep,
you do.
Okay. Just because there are literally a handful of people in your position, right, who were ever in your position, personally trained by L. Ron Hubbard, all the way to the top. What is, from a Scientologist point of view, first off, what is a class 12 attitude towards cases and towards Scientology?
Well, I don't know if attitude is something I can answer. A class 12 CS, the buck stops. There's no senior more authority you can go to. Right. You are expected to take someone who comes in the door, salivating in the mouth, lunatic, spitting on people, and you can absolutely make that person sane just by the technology, without any referral to a higher authority or help me, I don't know what to do next. So at that peak of having studied it all, done everything, you can turn an insane person into a sane person. Does that sum it up? A class 12 CS?
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of something Hubbard actually said about that. There was a bulletin where he talked about that, and I think he said almost exactly that. And he also talked about how, I'm curious because I've never asked a former class 12 this. When you were on the ship, Hubbard said, you know, class 12s were listened to with hushed breath, you know, ooh, even if they're commenting on the weather. I mean, did you find yourself in that position of authority?
Well, we were the rock stars at the time. The class 12s were. Now, it's the money you give. The IAS donors are the rock stars. Chris, do you know in orgs, there's very little pictures of LRH. Do you know what pictures are up internally these days?
No.
The IAS patron meritorious, exodorious, flavatorious.
Gloritorious, yes. That is ridiculous.
The pictures up, even walking to exams, are those with big trophies saying, he gave 5 million to the college, he gave 10 million.
That's
those are the new rock stars, right?
That's right. That's right. That's actually something, that was a campaign that just slowly insinuated itself into the orgs. It just, over years and years of time, I'm thinking back to when those posters first appeared and we started hearing about the IAS more and more and more. And it was finally in the 2000s when that's just all they ever talk about now.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, when I got into Scientology in the 80s, it was about auditors. And it was about making auditors. And it was about, like, orgs took pride in making auditors. It was something to be an auditor. That was the only real status that existed in Scientology when I first got in was, are you an auditor? Yeah. Now it's how much money have you given? And I lived through that whole morphine. When I first got in, nobody gave a shit about how much money you were giving to the church. That wasn't the important thing. It was, are you trained? What level are you? You know, processing side, sure, but also training side, you know? Yeah. And now that they don't even care. I mean, Miscavige utterly sabotaged auditor training. So that's not even a thing.
I'm thinking back to a question you asked me earlier of why would you say it was a cult? By the way, your videos on are just brilliant, especially on why is it a cult, why is it a religion. Those videos I've listened to more than once. They're brilliant, Chris.
Thank you.
I will tell you that a little addendum on why you asked what are your thoughts of it being a cult. A cult has love only me as a premise. By love only me, a cult will have you divorce your spouse, disconnect from your spouse, kick out your children if they're dissident. The love only me means your priority, which is very much in vogue in the cult of Scientology. You must make Scientology your absolute priority over family.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense to the American public. Your church over your family? Not only your church, but a punitive, vindictive, fair gaming, punishment church with a baton ready to clobber you. That must be your true love.
That's right.
And anything less. So there are two more things I wanted to add as why it's a cult. One is the love only me, and the second one, money, cash. We
Yep.
want your money, and we want it now. Now, now, now. No matter what, no matter what happened in the world, a new suicide bomber exploded. Look, we need cash now. There's an emergency there. Cash. The love of cash is beyond anything I've ever seen. Did you experience that, Chris?
Absolutely. That was actually, again, one of those turning points for me of, oh, this has morphed into something I never even had any idea about, never wanted to be part of. Being a salesman, it used to bug me that that we were a church, quote unquote, and we had salespeople, and that everybody was supposed to get, trained in how to be a salesperson. That always weirded me out because I never really wanted to do sales. I didn't want to be, making pitches to people. I got in because I wanted to help people. And I mean, directly, I wanted to one-on-one audit them, train them, work with them, improve their lives. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. That was the only reason I signed up. And the salesmanship became more and more and more of a thing as the years went on. And it just always weirded me out. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
When they talk about a stat crash, everything goes from Thursday 2 o'clock to Thursday 2 o'clock. You are as good as last week's stats.
That's right.
How much you will be punished, how much privilege you get is dependent on Thursday 2 o'clock to Thursday 2 o'clock. How much did you produce? What did you bring in for the church? And now, the prime statistic of any church, a brick and mortar store, is revenue. What's called GI, gross income. Chris, I got from a very, very inside source that Celebrity Center stats had really crashed recently. Just crashed beyond a crash. And the first thing I thought is their revenue, maybe they made $100 all week. I have no idea. But Celebrity Center stat just crashed humongously.
Interesting.
I'm going to ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
But before I do, I want to ask, what happened to TV, Scientology TV? How could that be such a crash? Isn't Scientology TV going to take... This is proof that Scientology TV is rubbish, nonsense, bogus in terms of hype. It's hyped up to be it. Now, let me ask you, Chris, you were in all those years and you know all the ups and downs. Let's say an org only made $100 a week. Maybe they made $1,000. Who knows? But apparently that crash was crash. What's the punishment, Chris, to Sea Org members at Celebrity Center since their stats have crashed? What would you say is now happening to Sea Org members?
Well, if it's anything average or ordinary usual, then it's going to be beans and rice for the crew. It's going to be conditions, ethics conditions, and it might be even, one of the harsher things was a group condition where the entire organization was put into lower conditions, not just individuals like the exec council or the regs, the salespeople. Sometimes you'd have whole divisions that get put into a lower condition, but when the entire org goes into one, that's rice and beans. That's no days off, no holidays for anybody. Doesn't matter if your stats are up or down personally. Also when they do this state of emergency is one of the things that they would call this, and then you don't even have any protection on your job. I mean, you could just get yanked off your job and thrown into the galley or the grounds crew. You're picking up trash for the next 5 years because you were the one responsible. So, quote unquote, for the stat crash. I mean, anything's possible when they issue a state of emergency. So, so I would definitely be predicting bad things for that crew.
No, you said some good things. The one thing I hated in the cult when I was Sea Org is what I call blob treatment. Blob means everybody is punished.
Yep.
No matter what your personal slave labor was, no matter what your production, the whole group is going to suffer the same punishment. So you could work your butt off, but you come under the umbrella. And that's what made me start thinking the Sea Org is a cluster. So they treat everybody as a cluster.
Right.
The treatment of everybody is the same as everybody else.
That's right. That's right. Well, look at Miscavige. I mean, he's up there at the top. I'm surrounded by SPs. Everybody is an SP, right? So this guy's worldview is it's him versus everybody in Scientology. You know what I mean? Yes. And that's what he actually says that out loud to his people. Yes. I mean, what kind of morale, what kind of leadership does that demonstrate? You know?
David Miscavige talked to a big celebrity, and he asked this celebrity, "Do you know what I do? Do you really know what I do?" And she said, "Well, you're seeing that the orgs are managed correctly and that no. I am constantly searching for the suppressive persons around me and the suppressive persons lurking around to destroy Scientology." He shared that his primary job was hunting, using his snout to detect who was suppressive person. This is lunatic fringe.
Well, it is. It's completely paranoia, is what it is, and it's a very obvious outgrowth or logical consequence of his narcissism and his his crazy authoritarian thinking, because you get rid of all these people around you, and then you don't trust anybody, and then you bring new people in, and then you find reasons to hate and not trust them and punish them, and then you bring another round in, and he's probably done this 10 times, 20 over the years of this whole new round of command personnel. We've had at least since the 80s, there have been at least 4 evolutions of sending new command teams, new Sea Org members to be in charge of all the bases of Scientology and all the major organizations of Scientology. We've gone through this many times over the years, and it all stems from Miscavige's certainty that he is surrounded by suppressive people, and punishment is the only cure, because he doesn't know how to deal with people in any other way.
People often ask me, how does he hold power and why is he at the top?
Mm-hmm.
If you really look at history, the most terrifying guy, the biggest thug with the loudest voice and the ability to whack and kill and be violent inevitably rises to the top. Al Capone in Chicago, Saddam Hussein in Iran, the guy in Libya, Gaddafi in Libya, other people in the Middle East and wherever, the most violent thug, not to mention Hitler, not to mention Stalin, the guy who seems to be willing to be most ferocious gets to the top. Do you agree?
I do agree. I do. It's an unfortunate, sad, and it's a tragic even reality of our life here on this planet. But it is how it is. I mean, if you don't have scruples, if you don't have a moral compass, you have the ability to overpower people. If you have a flowery tongue, the gift of gab, the ability to speak clearly and motivate people with words they want to hear, then it doesn't really matter, your moral compass or your personality or whatever doesn't matter. If you can do that to people and get them to agree and follow you, you can rise all the way to the top. And it sometimes even seems like it's almost a requirement in some parts of the world that you be that way in order to gain leadership, or domination over others. And I hate that. I hate that that's a true fact, but it is,
Even in medieval England, you crossed the king off to the Tower of London. Your head was chopped off.
That's right.
See,
That's
this.
That's exactly right. We hope we can bring better systems and more enlightened leadership and better political systems and stuff to other parts of the world. But even we screw it up all the time, because you get into this thing of, well, I'm going to have to. Might is right. Is this this old ruling principle, and it's people don't want to acknowledge it's true, but it is.
Yeah.
It is. Hey, let me ask you about. Let's go off on something else completely different, because I've actually wondered about something for quite a while, and we brought it up in our things to talk about. So I thought this might be a good time. You were again as a class 12, highly trained. You had a full command of the technology of Scientology, and that's actually saying something, because there's a lot to it. You see people, even when I was in the church, I used to just absolutely tear my hair out about this. You see people go up the levels, go up to OT, and then go out ethics or, commit adultery, finance crimes, this kind of crap, or get sick, cancer, diabetes. I mean, they they get these like illnesses. And you go, well, but I thought the tech was supposed to put you in a position where that couldn't happen to you. That was the idea. That's kind of what was promised to us.
Yeah.
How'd you reconcile that with the tech and stuff? What was the thinking?
Well, the OT levels are majorly flawed. OT2 is elongated series of implants, which Hubbard evaluates that you had. The implants are dichotomy statements: surviving to create the now, destroying to create the now. That kind of thing. They're dichotomies. And you're supposed to chant these on the e-meter, and it's supposed to detach and erase your embedded implants. Now, some people look at this and can't even stomach it. You never hear of people who say, I want my money back. I'm out of here. You never ever hear of those. Some people read this, and it's especially OT3, the story of Xenu and the volcano and 36 days. There are people that say, this is not for me, and I want my OT package money back, and walk out the door.
Yep.
So Hubbard wrote these things, I think, and I think he did believe, from his case, from his paradigm. I don't know where he would have got 92 pages of dichotomies, which he says are implanted in you. You have these implants. I got absolutely nothing out of OT2. But where could someone be a better neighbor, a more compassionate, loving human being, a person with more understanding, more enlightenment, more ability to be benign, a better ability to have critical thought, by running out dichotomies which you are told are implants in your head? How does that even correlate? Why will you become more ethical if you chant these dichotomies on an e-meter to erase them? It's almost non sequitur to making you a better human being.
Well, and this was one of the things that upset me so much when I first read about this material, when I first downloaded it, because I didn't get exposed to the OT levels when I was in Scientology. I read about them after I got out. And I read this stuff and I thought, I knew what all of this was about. I had been familiar with implants and, Hubbard calls goals problem mass, GPMs and all this. And I spent a long time trying to figure all this stuff out when I was in Scientology. And then to find out this is what's on OT1, 2, you know, and then you get to the OT3. And I thought, are you kidding me? This is what's supposed to give me superpowers and telepathy and telekinesis and, you know, cause over life. I thought, you know, yeah, I get how this could clear up some misconceptions, but come on, this doesn't make any sense, you know?
What is outrageous and why I call it a cult is Scientology claim that they have given entities a birth certificate of 75 million years, and that only they, for $850 an hour, can exorcise you.
Yes.
Now, the Catholic Church, the Vatican has to give permission for an exorcism. They get a request every single day of the year from their outer churches asking can they do an exorcism. So doing an exorcism and having a theory that a ghost could be here and there is not new to Scientology. But Scientology have monetized it.
Right.
Monetized it. When you ask, why do people get drunk and beat up their wife after coming back from OT7 check? Why do they do out? You've heard of Rex Fowler was exercising his spirits for 20 years, then took a gun and shot in the brain of his staff member that he hadn't paid for 2 years. He killed a staff member after exercising his spirits for 20 years.
Right.
Chris, there is absolutely nothing there that makes you dare not challenge and ask, can I look at this a different way? Is there something better?
Right.
This is not my creation. This is Hubbard's creation.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is no way that sitting there, and do you know there are people who've been on doing this for 20, 30 years, paying flag $30,000 a year to do this? I think the longer one does this, actually David Mayo gave me some warning, and he said to me, we got in really good touch before he died. And then there was third party and there was a schism and all that. But he said to me, Karen, the more people do this self-exorcism, the worse shape they're going to be in. And so it's actually harmful. It's not just see what I get out of it. It's actually harmful to year in and year out, month in and month out, sit down and exercise body thetans or clusters of spirits attached to you. You will never become more loving. You will never become more caring. You will never get more enlightened. You will never have an ascension. An ascension is an altered consciousness where people get this on LSD or peyote or whatever. You go into almost a different time stream, but you become intensely aware that you are not just your body. I mean, I'm long done with Scientology, but I believe in reincarnation. That's a Buddhist precept. It's been believed in by ancient religions in the East for centuries. So Scientology doesn't have a copyright on believing in reincarnation.
Not
I believe
at all.
in reincarnation. I believe in the spirit. Do you?
I have hopes that it's true. And I hold on to those hopes pretty tightly, actually. I don't go so far as to say that I believe it totally, but right. I do not discount it. And I would never tell anybody you're wrong for thinking that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, you asked me, why did you get into Scientology? And you know, this boyfriend did, but he pushed my button. You will find out you are a reincarnated spirit. And I had an extraordinary experience when I went to Switzerland, and I was in my late teens, and I got goosebumps, and I recognized that as you turn the corner, there would be a lake, and then there would be hilly. I'd never been to Switzerland this lifetime, but I knew the terrain.
Yep.
And I was just
Yeah.
So
I actually love hearing about experiences like that, because there's all these things we run into in life that we don't really have explanations for. And, and sometimes you can go, the science route and look at them really closely and critically. And, okay, well, how else could that have, how can we explain that? And sometimes you find explanations, but I'm going to tell you, sometimes you don't. And sometimes there's just lingering questions. Sometimes there's just, wait a minute, that just doesn't make sense. And it's not hard to take that leap and go, maybe there is something spiritual going on here. And if so, does that mean I have to subscribe to some kind of dogma? No, it doesn't. It just means that something's going on here, and maybe it's spiritual, and maybe that's okay. And maybe we'll find some more solid, concrete answers to that. But in the meantime, I'm going to just hold on to this idea,
Well, do you... would you be willing to sleep in a graveyard, in a cemetery, all alone, deep buried, 1 mile into the graveyard, if there are no ghosts, and if you're not...
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, every time I see those memes on Facebook about, would you spend $1 million, for $1 million, would you spend a night, or a month in this? That I always go, yeah, right here, right now. Absolutely, I will,
Well, $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, seriously, I don't even think that you have to subscribe to some sort of religious doctrine in order to believe or have some idea that maybe there's more to life than what we see, and what we can sense, measure, and experience with our limited degree of senses,
Yeah.
and I'm, like I said, I just leave myself open to the possibility that anything's possible. Let's see what you got,
Right.
I look at it that way.
Yeah.
I was wondering, would you say, I mean, based on what you were just going over about the OT levels and stuff, I have looked at Scientology, and people have asked me many times, I'm sure they've asked you, what's the good stuff? Where, is there anything good in it? Well, yes, of course there is. None of us would have been involved with it for so many years if we hadn't seen some good products or results from doing or using Scientology. There's just no other really honest answer to that question. But I thought sort of have come to the place where I think to myself that a lot of that goodness or helpfulness comes from the lower levels. And I don't think the upper levels really have anything to offer. And that seems to align with what you just said. But tell me, what do you think?
Yes, I agree with you there. I think that the OT levels, everything you just said, these people that have given the church 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 to do these upper levels, blah. Lower levels do have some benefit. The L's have some intriguing questions, but there again, let me tell you how the L's came into being.
Perfect.
Back in the day, Chris, there was no such thing as money going up the command channel. There was no money. They used to call them folos, they're CLOs, and the folos, there was no structure where money was sent upward. In fact, lower orgs would go bankrupt and scream to Hubbard to bail them out. They wanted money from the top. They were not sending money. To run a ship is expensive. People don't realize just to park a ship, it's called berthing. You berth the ship at a harbor. You pay that country. You pay the harbor master huge amounts of money for every day that you are in port. Then you pay more for water hookups, for gasoline hook. You pay. There were about 400 of us on the Apollo, and we had 3 meals a day. So where is the money coming from to feed 400 staff 3 times a day, plus pay for all the ships. L's. Selling L's brought in revenue.
Ah.
There were 6 of us that kept the Apollo afloat. We audited L's morning, noon, and night from wealthy Scientologists that came and paid cash so that the Apollo could survive and Hubbard could continue his research. So originally, Hubbard had an idea that if he got a hotshot coming to Flag, coming to the Apollo, and giving them some very extremely good high-tech auditing, they would go out and boom the orgs. You've heard this. The
That's
old
right.
Scientology current TV is going to boom the orgs as celebrity center goes up. Boom the org, take the planet. So one person was chosen from each org, and I will tell you, they had their L's and they did FEBC on the Apollo, and they went back to their respective orgs and they sank. Nobody who did L's then boomed the org, ever.
Interesting.
A famous guy whose first name is Kent had all his L's, and he was touted as, look, Hubbard CS'd him, blah, 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 blah. And a few years ago, the feds came and arrested him and towed him away to the pen. And what he did after his 3 L's is he took out a scam with a name very similar to an existing charity. So there's a Salvation Army. He called his Salvation Army Incorporated.
Oh man!
So if there's a American Cancer Society, he called it American Cancer Organization. He changed the last word, and all these. He had a phone bank of Scientologists that called up old people. Said, "Can you just give $100?" And he raked in tons of money. And finally, these charities realized that their revenues were down. And Kent Stryker, the poster child of the L's, was ripping off charities with his name. And multiple attorney generals went after him, convicted him, indicted him, and he was towed off to the federal penitentiary, where I think he still is. So there's an example. That's the poster child of the L's.
Wow.
The L's will not increase your level of ethics or survival, but they do have some juicy questions. Let me give you a couple of sample questions on L10.
Please.
What is the worst thing another person has ever done to you on the whole track and this lifetime? What is the worst thing you have ever committed on another human being this life on the whole track? See, what is the worst thing you ever did to yourself on the whole track? These are titillating questions.
Yes.
Let me give you one more example, and then we'll move on to the next L. What is the biggest lie that you were made to believe? Challenging question.
Very challenging.
What is the biggest lie that you made another swallow or believe? You know?
Yes.
And flow 3 and then flow 0. What is the biggest lie that you made yourself believe?
Right.
These are enchanting questions.
For sure.
But the rest of the L10 is mostly sec check.
Right.
So you get sec check. Sec checks were a novel. All right, you have a global audience. Sec check means confessional.
Yeah.
Give us the dirt of what you've done. Yep. You're a sinner. You're a bad guy. And all day long and all night long and all year long, you've been doing horrible things. Cough it up. Give it to us. Now remember that anything you tell the cult of Scientology is on video. Not to mention that the counselor is handwriting what you said. And I will look you in the eye, Chris, and I will tell you, anything you say to the cult of Scientology can and will be used against you on a hate page when you depart.
That is
Be warned.
absolutely truth. That is absolutely true. Yeah. Let me ask you a technical question real fast, because it's something I always wondered about when I was still in Scientology and never having gotten access to the L's or, you know, class 10, 11, and 12 materials. There is a special, like, way that class 12s, you know, use the e-meter, assess questions, and they're looking right at the person, right? Is that, because normally when you're using an e-meter in a Scientology session, you ask a question and you look at the meter. You're not looking at the guy you're auditing. You're looking at the meter. Sometimes you'll look up at the guy and talk to him or get his answers, you know, when you're not having to pay attention to the meter. But apparently, when you're, you know, doing the L's, you're always looking at the guy, and you have to be aware of what the meter's doing anyway. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. There are drills you do in the L's where you learn to be able to see the meter while not looking at it.
Okay.
You drill to have more expanded parameter vision.
Got
and
it.
you know what? If the meter is in the right place and the person's right there, you can see it. I'll tell you what's addictive about auditing. You keep hearing about auditing counseling. Why would anyone want to pay the cult of Scientology anything? I'll tell you what it is, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
It's very seductive to have one person only focus on you. The sun rises and sets with you, the PC. There could have been many.
I think you're absolutely right about that.
Good.
I'm sorry, I just cut you off there, but I just wanted to agree with you, because I see that there is I've never mentioned this before. I don't think I've ever actually talked about this, and this is actually a really good point that you're bringing up right now. There is a focus on you when you're the pre-clear, when you're in an auditing session, that is truly quite unlike almost anything else anywhere in life that you will ever experience.
Yes.
Where this person, say, you know, we talk about the horrors of sec checking and the repetitiveness of auditing and the hypnotic trance induction techniques of auditing, and that's all true. But you're right. There's this positive side to this, to an auditing session that doesn't really get talked about a lot, but is so important to what auditing is, that is different from psychological counseling, very different.
Right.
Because I've had counseling and it's not like this.
Right.
And that is that this auditor, this person who's in this room with you, you are in a quiet room. It is just the two of you. The door is closed. There's no one else around. If it's being filmed, you're not seeing the cameras.
Yes.
And even if a camera is in the room, because sometimes there were cameras on tripods when they weren't, you know, back in the day, you didn't really care. Because this guy, this auditor, whether it's a man or a woman, is sitting across from you, and you can tell them anything.
Yes.
You can say or do anything in an auditing session, and it's totally okay. Right. No one's going to, they're not going to, there is going to be judgment, okay? But it's not happening right there in the moment.
Yes.
There's no auditor is ever going to tell you, well, that's homophobic. Well, that's transphobic. Well, that's this. Well, that's that. If you say anything, they don't care. It doesn't matter what you say. They're not going to judge you for it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually quite a powerful experience to have, because in the real world, out in life, you're judged all the time.
Yeah.
And that itself can become kind of an addicting thing, in addition to the euphoria that you feel at the end of a session.
Yes.
That's a really good point, Karen. I'm glad you brought that up. I've never commented on that before.
Yeah. Well, very good, Chris. It's not just that you have someone's undivided attention. They're interested in what you're saying.
Yes.
And they're trained to give you perfect acknowledgments. Perfect. Can I tell you a very short anecdote of how I use this in real life?
Yes, please.
When the cult was raided by the FBI, the church spokesman at the time was Artie Marin.
Oh, yeah, good old Artie. Yeah, he's still around. That's right.
Yeah, he's still in. So Artie Marin was given a John Doe subpoena, and he was towed away to a jail in Washington, D.C. for not answering questions in a court of law. He was being asked, where is Howard? And he knew Howard's location. He wouldn't answer, so he was in jail. Artie was asked, whatever you want, you can have. What do you want? He said, I want Karen Jench, class 12, to come and audit me. That was his wish list. I was put on a plane from the Flag Land Base in Clearwater. The year was 1977. And I was flown to Washington, D.C., where I, for 6 weeks, was there for Artie Merritt. I've never told this story. I've never told this story before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this jail was violent. Serial killers, this was not a medium security jail. I went through, you would not believe what it's like to get into. But it started causing a fury in the jail that he was getting a daily visitor. And I was getting to, I was dressed in black, I had a silver cross, my hair I was dressed like a nun. You would never recognize me. I looked like a nun. And as I walked in the jail, people would say, good morning, sister. Good morning. Good afternoon, sister. Even jail attendants were, I looked like a Catholic nun. So finally, one day, I could never, Artie was in a glass box because they suspect that even a nun could pass drugs or whatever. I had no contact. He was in this glass box. And a huge thug, 200-pound gorilla, came and grabbed my arm and said, Major Gados wants to see you. And I was literally dragged. This was right in the middle of, and I said to Artie, I'm acknowledging a big interruption. I'll be back. And I was shoved down corridors to the head of this DC jail. He was intimidating. He looked like he could have been an inmate. He was 300-pound gorilla. And he looked at me and said, slamming on the desk, I'm not having my jail disrupted with your daily visits. Who the hell do you think you are? And I said to him, what is your name? And he yelled, Major Gatos! And I said, thank you. And he leaned back and looked at me with interest. Long story short, whatever he said, I used the old TR2 and gave him acknowledgments. I had no power, no nothing. I just made him feel. In other words, I can't say I put him in session, but I treated him like it was only him and me. And what he said was valuable. I understand you, Major Gatos. Thank you for sharing that. Guess what? I was on his arm. He took me right back to session, and I could come to see Marty every day.
Yep.
Use of TR.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I have gotten myself out of some sticky situations using that as well. I don't know that, when you get trained in this stuff and then you go out in life and you have get some experience under your belt, I think a lot of former Scientologists or even active Scientologists would say that helped them in some fashion, like that, with difficult, tricky, even hostile situations. And there is a power to communication and to good communication. And it's a lot more than just, using your words or using your words well, or having words to use. It's just, it is more basic than that. And I think that this is one of the more positive lessons from the TRs is it starts with the presence. It starts with just being there. And as long as you don't get all into the weird, trancy shit, which you can get into, and it can get pretty weird pretty fast. But but just learning a skill of being able to stand there or sit there or whatever and just look at somebody else who's, maybe doesn't have really good intentions towards you, that gives you some power. It really does, and to be able to face up to that and talk to it and deal with it, without getting yourself confrontational and hostile and, and this kind of thing. I think that that's a valuable skill for people to have, actually.
Well, you earlier asked, does it have any good? Is there any good or anything? Well, Scientology has 50,000 things that are abhorrent and abominable and just over the top and beyond horrific. And even if you get some goodness, it's at a huge cost, because you can, when you walk in that door, I caution you, you can go bankrupt, you can lose your family. The cost of doing Scientology outweighs any possible good. But what you just summarized was very, very good, Chris, because people say, well, there's supposed to be some good. Show me some good.
Right.
Well, just teaching people to acknowledge, listen, pay attention, have what we call a communication cycle. That's valuable.
And again, I'm going to reiterate what you just said too. I mean, don't take anything I just said as an endorsement of Scientology. There are other ways to learn these skills without the authoritarian nonsense that Scientology brings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yes, just to be clear about that, because it's good for us to talk about the pros and the cons. It's good for us to talk about the good and the bad, but don't mistake that for, hey, go out and do some Scientology, because that's no, man, that's not what this is all about. Right. Karen, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up here, folks. Any questions, comments, feedback, good, bad, or sideways, leave it in the comment section below here on YouTube. I am very, very interested in what you have to say in response to some of what we talked about here today. And as always, if you find my channel informative, educational, and entertaining, consider supporting me on Patreon. That is how we keep a roof over our heads, and I get better equipment and spaces and all of that in order to better give you content here. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. So this is a quick, short message about the state of affairs in Shelton Land, in my world. You can see I'm using a bit of a different impromptu background here at my desk because we have construction going on at the apartments that I'm living in right now, and everything is just kind of a real mess around me. And that leads me to there's a possibility, there's an opportunity that I have right now to get a bigger apartment where I will actually have a room for a studio and not be in my living room. Now, this is kind of obviously important to me, maybe not so important to everybody out there, but then again, for maybe some of you long-term subscribers and people who would like to see an improvement and upgrade in my channel, maybe you could help me pull this off. What I want to do on Patreon is I would like to get up to $1,500 a month from where we're at now. We're pretty close, I think, right now to around $1,200 a month. So if I could bump it up to that, then I could actually have the income to be able to afford to be in that larger apartment that's open right now as a possibility. and then have an actual studio, a dedicated space. And that will improve quite a few things, actually, about the quality of the work that I do here. So if you're at all interested in seeing this channel get upgraded in that direction, then please sign up on Patreon and support my channel and my efforts here to bring you the best work that I can do on a consistent basis with the 3 videos a week that I post. I, of course, appreciate any and all support you guys throw my way, whether it's through a one-off through PayPal or through YouTube, or through a subscription through Patreon. Now, what I can offer you through Patreon in terms of incentive to do this is, and when I first started Patreon, I was not doing special content. I was just saying, hey, look, if you want to back me up, that's the way to do it. But I have since started offering some things to my Patreon supporters only, such as a monthly dedicated Q&A or conversational video that just is between us. It's kind of similar to the live stream Q&As that I do, but it's only for my Patreons, and it's only kept there on my Patreon channel for them. I also have some ideas of some special humorous bonus content that I want to put together with my wife Melissa that I think might appeal to some of you guys too. But there's some surprises there, so I'm just going to say right now that we've got some ideas that we thought might be kind of fun that we could share with you guys. And I am always, always open to any other ideas people might have as to what might incentivize people to become part of my Patreon support page. So that is my message right now. I'll be tagging this onto my videos for the next couple months as I have this possibility opening up here. See if we can pull this off. Again, the goal is $1,500 on Patreon, so anything you can do to contribute to that would be helpful, whether it's just $1 a month or more. Some people do substantially more, and it is so appreciated. All right, guys, thanks for listening to this message, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.